So I did a video about this, how to get rich
on YouTube,
and that is to have a rich dad. So many young men that work so hard. They work so hard and they're not getting rich and they think it's their fault. You know, and that's why I think it's so important that we tell young people the truth, which is we have created a very unequal society where it's increasingly about what you inherit. It's increasingly about what family you're from. And, you know, I'm campaigning to change that.
クロスディグ101始まります。今日のテーマは天才トレーダーに学ぶお金の真実です。というのもこのギャリー・スティーブンソンさんという人が、早川書房からトレーディングゲームっていう本を書いてて、これめちゃくちゃ面白いです。もうなんかネットフリックスのドラマを一気見するような、面白さがあって、彼ちょっと紹介するとですね、東ロンドンの労働者階級で生まれたんですけど、その後 LSE っていう、ロンドンのエリート学校に行って、でシティグループですよね、シティバンクに就職して FX トレーダーになって、大金持ち億万長者になったと。ただ途中で、この資本主義がいかにぶっ壊れてるか気づいて、辞めて今 YouTube で132万人の YouTube 番組やってもうロンドンでは大人気だそうです。彼からお金の真実を学びたいですし、ちょっと最初はですね、どうやったらお金持ちになれるのかっていう質問もしてみたいと思います。では早速お呼びしましょう。ギャリー・スティーブンソンさんです。よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。
今日はちょっと英語でインタビューするんですけど、ただ最初なんか日本語を喋れるってことにこの収録1分前に気づいて、ちょっとだけ日本語話してもいいですか？
もちろん大丈夫。でも敬語とかはちょっと下手だけど頑張れる。
なんで日本語喋れる？シティバンクにいた時に最後の1年半は丸の内にいたんですね。
丸の内で働いていたよね。なんか、2年ぐらい東京に住んでいたんけど、なんか最初はすごくなんかカルチャーショックしてたね。だからなんか慣れるように一生懸命日本語を勉強していたんですけど、まだまだですね。
まだまだ。で今回も久しぶりに日本ですか？
なんか去年もなんか東京から鹿児島まで自転車の旅した。夏だった。
夏。
死ねるほど暑かった。
暑かった。
でも楽しかった。
楽しかった。
タヌキも見た。
タヌキを見た。今回はいつ？昨日来たんですよね。
東京は昨日来た。1週間沖縄な。時差ボケのために。なん
か東京で食べましたご飯？
昨日なんかサイゼリア行きたかったんですけど、なんかすごく人並んでいた。
もうサイゼリア今人気なんですよ。
人気なんかもともとから人気なんだ。
もともと美味しいですよね。
でもなんかそんな並ばなければならないやつは、
確かに
見たことない。
なるほど。ちなみに英語のインタビュー始める前に YouTube 大人気ですね。
最近、イギリスで、特に今年すごく人気になった。
なんでそんなに人気なんですか？
多分本のおかげでね。本もなんか本はイギリスで11週間全国一番になった。だからすごく YouTube もフォロワー増えてて、じゃあちょっと有名人っぽくなった。ちょっと生活は難しくなった。
もう街で声かけられるんですよね。
そう、あんまり歩けない。
YouTube 皆さん見てほしいんですけど、経済の難しい話もしてるじゃないですか。なんであんなに人気なんですかね？なんか
僕ね、なんか最近ね、日本もイギリスもすごく経済は問題になったんでしょ。でもなんかじゃあイギリスには、階級制度大切だよね。でもなんかテレビ見たら経済とかについて話してる人はみんななんかお金持ちの家族から来てる。
富裕層とかもともとお金持ちの人、
だから普通な人はそう見たらじゃあ僕のような人じゃないと思ってるかな。だからなんか僕ね、イギリス人2人やったらなんか5秒以内なんか他の人の階級制度わかるでしょ。
そうなんですか。
本当に。だから
服とかですか？
なんか服とか、なんか話し方もすごく大事でしょ。だって普通の人は僕の YouTube を見たらすぐにこの人はじゃあ僕と同じみたいと思ってるから、だから人気と思ってる。それにいつもすごくなんかはっきりなんかシンプルに説明しようとしてるから人気だと思ってる。
そっか、いいですね。ちょっと早速皆さん YouTube ぜひ見てほしいんですが、この本についてちょっと英語でインタビューしていきたいと思います。いいですか？今から英語で。
もちろん英語も話せる。
英語も話せる。そうなんですね。日本語だけじゃないんですね。はい。じゃあちょっと3 part インタビューで、まず part 1、so I want to ask how to get rich. I know it's a silly question, but everyone wants to know. And number 2, we want to know the secret games of the rich. When I read your book, this is an awesome book, and I found out that how rich people like to play roles and how they behave, what are their strategies. And for the final part, you argue that we live in a world of a broken economic system. So I want to know how, especially our audience, can survive in this broken economic system. So first question, I'm sorry, but how do you get rich?
Yeah, it's funny you ask me that because a good Japanese friend of mine actually came to my house the other day and he asked me this exact question. He said, I have a question for you. How do I get rich? And I remember thinking like, ask me any other question. You know, if you want to know how to get like really muscly, I'll say go to the gym. If you want to know how to learn Japanese, I will show you the textbooks to read. But I think in this society we live in today, most young people, especially young men, they are obsessed with getting rich. But I think the truth is, so I came from a poor background and I got into a very elite university and I managed to get this very elite job and I was able eventually to get rich. But if you go now to the trading floors of London or even the trading floors of Tokyo, you're not going to find any people there from poor backgrounds. Pretty much everybody who is there is from a rich family. So what that means is in reality, it's almost impossible to get rich if you come from a poor family. So I did a video about this, how to get rich.
On YouTube,
which is a very popular subject on YouTube.
Right.
And I just decided to tell the truth, which is I think that there is only really one strategy which is really effective and successful in today's society to get rich. And that is to have a rich dad. That's what you need to do. And what I said on my YouTube was, you know, if you didn't have a rich dad, well, try again. Because that's really, that's the way to get rich. And I know people don't want to hear that because people want to hear something that they can actually take action on.
Right. Or something you can do about it.
Yeah, but I think the truth is, you know, I don't know anyone except for myself who came from a poor background. It's almost impossible to get those good jobs if you're not from a rich family. And, you know, what a lot of young men in London, in the UK are doing, I don't know about Japan, is they've started to try to do trading on the internet. And I think this is phenomenally dangerous. I think it's phenomenally dangerous. And a lot of people message me saying, you know, I tried to do trading on the internet and I lost all of my money. You know, you can look at the statistics and you can see the vast majority of people who do it lose money. You know, I think if you go back 30 or 40 years, we lived both in Japan and in the UK in societies where people could come from a poor background, work really hard, get a lot of money, buy property, buy assets.
Like an American dream or something.
Yeah, I think it was possible. Yes. It was possible 30, 40 years ago for maybe our parents' generation. But the truth is now, when you look at how expensive stocks are, how expensive house prices are, and how low wages are, I think realistically, it's unfortunately increasingly impossible for ordinary people. And this is a big part of the message of my book.
Right. So why is that? So in order to get rich, you have to have a rich dad or a mom or parent. So is it because you have to get a decent education to get rich? So could you elaborate on that?
I think there's basically two parts to this. The first part is it's almost impossible to get those good jobs if you're not from a rich background. Again, my parents' generation in the UK, they could go to university for free. But now it's extremely expensive to go to university and it's extremely competitive to get those good jobs. The first part of this book is about how did I get the job on the trading floor. And so I went to London School of Economics, which is one of the most famous economics universities in the world. And I was one of the top students there. I had really, really good grades. But the way that I got the job was cheating in a card game. That's how I got the job.
Right.
And you know, that's ridiculous. And but that's the way the world is nowadays because other people were getting these jobs because they had the right connections. They had all the right kind of extracurricular activities on their CV that their parents had arranged when they were young. So the truth is, it's almost impossible to get these jobs if you're not from a rich background now. So that's the first thing. Getting the jobs is almost impossible. But the second thing is, it's the cost of assets. It's the cost of assets. So, you know, I'm not an expert on what's happening to house prices in Japan. But if you look at house prices in Europe, in the UK, in the US,
it's extremely high
compared to 30, 40 years ago. So what that means is young people 30, 40 years ago, our parents, our grandparents, they could work really hard, save some money, buy a house, maybe buy two houses, maybe buy some of the stock market. But now those things are so expensive compared to wages, and also things like rent is high, basic cost of living is high, that it's impossible to accumulate those assets. So one of the things I sometimes say when I'm doing interviews like this in the UK is I say capitalism is over, in the sense that there was a couple of generations in the UK, definitely here in Japan. I mean, you see it here in Japan, you see a lot of the older people, they accumulated a lot of assets. People who worked in the 70s, people who worked in the 80s. But now it's basically impossible. And what that means is all that really matters is how much you inherit from your parents. And we're kind of moving away from this capitalist society where what you get out depends on what you put in. And we're moving towards what we saw in Europe in maybe the 1800s or the 1900s, or even a long time before that, where really all that really matters is who your parents are. And I don't think this is a good thing. This is a big part of why I do my YouTube.
It's a bad thing,
it's a big part of why I wrote
it's the truth. It's a reality.
And I think it's really important that we tell young people that, because we again, I don't know so much about here, but in the UK and the US, we tell young people, if you want to get rich, you just need to work hard.
Yeah, that's the story. That's the narrative we are hearing.
But it doesn't work. I don't want to say this, but it doesn't work. But it's important to say this, because if you tell young people, you just need to work harder, but you give them a game where working hard doesn't work, then you're going to make them go crazy. You're going to give them mental health problems. And I know so many young men that work so hard.
Yeah.
They work so hard and they're not getting rich, and they think it's their fault. And that's why I think it's so important that we tell young people the truth, which is we have created a very unequal society where it's increasingly about what you inherit. It's increasingly about what family you're from. And I'm campaigning to change that. I think we should tax very wealthy families more. I think we should tax working people less. And I think we should try to move to an economy where ordinary working people are able to accumulate assets, are able to get rich. And I think in order to do that, you need to deal with inequality. You need to deal with the tax system.
Do you think the current system is like a game that the rules are already written and it's like 100% impossible for like a beginner to participate and actually win? Is that the case?
It's a bit. So I don't know. Is the board game Monopoly popular here?
Kind of, but could you kind of explain Monopoly is? Yeah,
it's the most popular board game
in the world.
In the US. And it's you go around the board trying to buy properties, and then you build up these properties. And the way it normally ends is the way it always ends is one person collects all the properties and they win.
Yeah, this is a rich area like the board.
Broadway, I'm sure there must be a Tokyo version. I'm sure there is.
Right? Maybe Roppongi is.
Yeah, this kind of thing. There's a London version and there's a New York version. But what we're kind of doing now is we're forcing young people to enter the game when all of the properties are already bought, and there's nowhere for you to go. And the reason, one of the big messages I wanted to communicate in my book, and the reason I called it the trading game, was I wanted to talk about this kind of gamification aspect of money and ambition nowadays, which is, I think especially to young men, we tell them like, the only thing that matters is how much money you get. And then we present to them, I think the education system is kind of like a game. We say, listen, if you get the best grades, you go to the right university, you get this kind of job. And then I worked as a trader. Being a trader is almost, it is a computer game. Okay, You're sitting there with 9 screens, with all of these lines.
It's literally a game.
Buy, sell. And I love games. I won my job in a game. That's why the book is called The Trading Game. When I was a kid, I loved games. I used to win a lot of maths competitions. I think the problem with when you turn things into a game is you kind of dehumanize the players. So, if you walk around London or New York, or even certain parts of Tokyo or Osaka, you're going to see all these homeless people. And I think it's natural to be like, why is this happening? The number of homeless people is increasing massively in London. I'd expect it's maybe happening here as well. And you should feel like this is not right. But when you spend every day playing this game, it's easy to think, well, that happens because they didn't play the game well enough. And I played the game better. And I think there's something very dehumanizing and I think unnatural. But it justifies this inequality. And I think personally, it makes people unhappy. And so, a big part of the story of this book is I came from a poor background.
Right.
I got this job. I was very good at the game. And I made a lot of money, and I was really unhappy. But it was not just me. I wanted to really. One thing I wanted to do in this book is really. I wanted to bring you on the trading floor, and I worked on trading floors in London and also in Tokyo. And I wanted you to get to know these people. And what I saw was a lot of rich, unhappy people. And I obviously I compared them to my dad, who is a poor person, was always a poor person, and he was much less unhappy than these people. So I kind of wanted to show you this system where we set this game up. so that the winners are desperately poor. Sorry, the losers are desperately poor, but even the winners are unhappy. And I don't think it's working. And for me, I wanted this book to be a call to arms to the British public, but also people around the world. And I'm really happy for it to be released here in Japan, because obviously I lived in Japan, and about the last third of the book is set in Japan.
I think we are facing a similar situation, because a lot of our viewers who are young people, they're suffering from not able to even enter the game. And in your book, in the beginning, you mentioned that you went to LSE, it's a good school. So you have to go to LSE, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard in order to, just to get an internship job. In the beginning, you participate in this contest, which that led to your Citibank job. So is that the case? You have to be at the prestigious university to just participate as an intern.
I mean, you need to.
So it's a very closed door.
My kohai, when I was working in Japan, he went to Todai, and I think most of the people to get into that job. But even once you get into the good university, even then to get the job, you need the connections, which means you probably need to come from the right family.
That's right.
And it gets presented as a fair game, but it's never at any point.
Because people argue that, we have entrance exams in university, and that's a fair game. So people in Japan argue that you just have to try hard, get into the University of Tokyo, and you can get rich. And you're arguing that that's not the case.
Well, I mean, the first thing is the competition for getting into the university is probably not fair.
Right.
I didn't even have a desk to do my homework on, and I was studying with people who they've got all of these personal tutors, these kinds of things. But I was able to get in. But even once you get in, the system of then getting into the good job, there's a space on the application. So one thing I think is quite interesting is to get this job, and this is the situation in London, you need to get an internship. You need to get your internship in your second year of university. But in your second year, you don't have your grades yet.
Right.
So how do they decide who do they give the internships to? Well, it's all about your extracurriculars on your CV. And of course,
volunteer work or those
and then
things.
When I was a kid, I was delivering newspapers, and I was working in a sofa store, fluffing pillows, because that's what ordinary people do when they're kids. But these other guys from rich families, private schools, they'd all done these amazing things, like founded the Junior United Nations, or worked at some charity in Africa, or played the clarinet at some amazing concert, and then you realize, wow, this game was kind of rigged from the start. But I think that's also one of the things I wanted to play with this a bit in the book, because the fact is, I think one thing people don't realize is when you create this system where the best jobs are allocated not really by ability or by intelligence, but they're allocated based on who your family is, the end result is you get a lot of not very smart people in the top jobs. So it creates this kind of space for humor, where I come from a very poor background and everybody thinks this guy's an idiot because of the way he looks, because of the way he sounds. But the truth is, I'm much smarter than these people. And the way that I won that competition was kind of by pretending to be stupid. And I think there's, a lot of opportunities to play with, and I hope the Japanese can sort of learn from and learn about the British class system, the class system in the West, and what these very unequal societies look like. Because one thing which I'm always struck by when I come to Japan, and I come to Japan often, I love Japan, I speak Japanese, Japan does not yet have the levels of inequality which we see in places like the United Kingdom, or we see in places like the United States. And that means, you have this big middle class, and you have this big middle class economy, and you have restaurants for ordinary people, and you have hotels for ordinary people, and everything is affordable for ordinary people. But inequality is increasing in Japan. And if you allow it to keep increasing, you will move to the kind of space that we have in the UK or they have in the US, where everything is set up to cater for the rich, and everything is either super luxury or really low quality. And you get this divide. And, Japan is a country which is very important to me. It's kind of a second home for me. And I don't want Japan to go the same direction that my country has gone, where you have this great level of inequality. And whenever two people meet each other, straight away we need to judge each other. Are you richer than me? Are you poorer than me? And we lose the ability to interact with people as equals.
This makes perfect sense, because like you mentioned, Japan is a relatively middle-class country, but it's changing, because what happened is, I think it's very similar to what you said, that the universities, they say that we won't judge you by just only paper tests. We'll ask you about your experience. And the irony is that when the university asks the students about their experience, all the rich students, young people, they go to Australia and they learn about different cultures, and their stories are amazing. And those are the students who get into great university in Tokyo. And it's a very ironical situation because it was kind of a universal reform to not just a person by a paper test, but as their experience, but you have to be rich to gain those experience.
Yeah. I think once you have, I talk a lot on my YouTube about wealth inequality. Once you have that inequality growing, it's very difficult for the universities to keep that level of fairness. Because when there is such a power imbalance within your society, what you will get is rich families will gain whatever system the university set up. Like, for example, this having extracurriculars on your CV. The rich people know that. Poor people don't know that. And also they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to do those things. So, universities can try whatever they like. And I think it's good to try the best you can to make sure that intelligent people from poorer backgrounds can get into those universities. But if you don't manage the distribution of wealth and resources and power in your society at large, there's very little the universities can do. And this is a big part of the message which I always try to communicate on my YouTube and also, of course, in the book.
In Japan, we have the term called Oya gacha.
Oya gacha.
Yeah.
I've not heard this.
Oya is parent.
Yeah.
And gacha, I'm sure you know this. Gacha is like a toy. You get a ball, plastic ball, and you get like a...
Wakaru.
So it's like parent lottery.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you have that term so people understand.
Yeah, it's a very critical term, Oya gacha. But people say that, like you mentioned, you have to try hard. Even you have a bad... You grew up in a very poor family. You can try hard to change that situation, but you're arguing that it's very difficult.
Yeah, but have you seen Squid Game?
Yes.
Yeah, the Korean, I worry.
And Parasite, the Korean movie.
Listen, of course, I never told anyone they shouldn't work hard, and I worked hard. And you read my book, you'll see I work hard. And I would tell any young people, you need to work. You need to work hard, 100%. But also, we need to protect that fairness in society because otherwise, you end up in a situation where from poor back in the UK, it's almost impossible to escape from poor background, and Japan is not at that level, but it can reach that level.
Reach that level.
And then even where we are now, we still have people in the UK saying, well, it's your fault, you're not working harder. How extreme does it have to get before we accept that no, this is not the fault of individuals. This is the fault of inequality in society.
Yeah. I agree. So let's talk about this, the broken economic system and the last part. For the second part, I want to know the secret games of the rich because there are a lot of rich people in your book and they act differently.
Yeah.
So what are their protocols and what are their strategies? You have observed a lot of rich people.
There's so many different. So I think the first story I'll probably tell is, so towards the end of my career, I moved to Japan, I moved to Tokyo. But by then my mental health was not really good and I really wanted to quit the industry. And I told my boss, who was American, but also working and living in Japan, I wanted to quit. And the opening scene of my book is basically that boss in a kind of a corporate ramen
and there are two bowls of ramen.
In a Marunouchi skyscraper.
Not like a street ramen shop.
Yeah, you know these in the skyscrapers. So it's kind of fake ramen. And he basically says to me, look, if you want to quit, we're going to see you. He says to me, I like you, I think you're a good person. Sometimes bad things happen to good people. And this starts this whole game where I'm trying to quit and senior management at Citibank are trying to make me stay. They're trying to sue me. And there was this period where every single day I would have like 5 meetings. And of course, Citibank is a big international company, so I've got my local management in Tokyo, and then there's the management in London, there's the management in New York, and there's the management in Sydney. And I'd have all these different meetings. And every meeting would be with a different, like it could be one-on-one, it could be like 5 people, it could be like some people on the internet, and then different groups of people. And they would always have a strategy for the meeting. But the strategies would be like totally inconsistent. So do you know what good cop, bad cop is?
Yeah.
So good cop, bad cop, I don't know if you have a translation for this. It's, there's 2 people, and one of them is really nice to you, and the other one just shouts at you. And that's like they're trying to win you over. But I would have a meeting where like this guy shouts in my face for like an hour. And then the next meeting, there'd be 5 people. And everyone's really, really nice to me. And maybe the same person is there in the meeting. Wow. And you would see, like, this guy doesn't care. Like just before he was shouting at me, he's saying he loves me. And what I would realize is that, again, it's about this idea of playing games, which is these people. So when, you or I speak, or when ordinary people speak, there's this kind of assumption, I say something or you say something, because I believe it.
Yeah, you say it from the bottom of your heart.
You believe something.
Yeah. Or you're a nice person.
You just say what you actually believe. Yeah. Like, these guys would go into a meeting, they'd have a strategy. I want to get this thing, so I'm going to say this thing. And there's no connection with what you actually believe or what you actually think. And I found this so interesting. And when Donald Trump became president for the first time, he does this all the time.
Yeah, he's a rich person.
He does this all the time, which is, he says whatever he thinks will be most likely to get him the outcome he wants.
So it's like playing a character or playing a role.
It's like chess. The rule, the line in the book is, there's no such thing as a dishonest move in chess. You know, we have a conversation. It's about, what do you think? What do I think? But we're playing chess. It's about which one of my moves beats you.
Right.
And that's what I realized working in the bank. And it reminds me so much of some of the things Donald Trump says, some things Elon Musk says, or a lot of powerful people. I can see that game playing mentality. And then you can see the dehumanizing element of the game.
That makes sense.
Yeah, when I speak to you, there's assumptions about honesty. Not just honesty in that I don't lie, but honesty in that I say things which are authentic to my beliefs.
Right.
But in games, you know, in games, is there such a thing as a lie? Because everything is a strategic move. You know, and I think this is, you know, of course, I don't speak about every rich person. You know, I am a rich person. You know, I try my best to be honest whenever I can. Yeah. But I do think there's this really interesting thing which rich and powerful people do, which is they turn ordinary human interactions into strategic games.
So you're saying that so let's say, Gary, you're mad at me.
Okay.
If I'm an ordinary person, so I think you're mad, so I try to rethink what I did wrong to you. But if you are a rich person, but if you're a rich person, you play being mad.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump does this all the time.
To manipulate
Donald Trump does this all the time. You see it, but you know, it's not. I don't want to keep singling Donald Trump out, because this is not the behavior of just Donald Trump. This is very, very common of powerful people, or people who. This is the result of somebody who has become very much a game player in their mind. But I worry a little bit as we turn increasingly things like the education system into a game, and you tell young people it's about working hard. You know, Japan is very much a kind of unwritten rules, honor-based society. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And it's
right.
It's in many ways, this game-playing mentality is kind of the antithesis to your traditional ideas in Japanese culture. But this is the direction that society is going in. I think you lose something very important about society when you tell people, listen, the way to be a success in society is to always play the game. Because when you train someone to play the game all the time, you lose something important about our connection as humans to each other. And I wanted this to be one of the important messages that comes through in the book.
So if the rich people are playing games, playing a character, like being strategic, so the viewers, maybe most people are like ordinary people, do you think we should be like them? We should be also playing some role?
I don't think you should lose your... At the end of the day, if the poor try to compete with the rich by playing games as individuals, the poor will lose. And that is what is happening. And that is why inequality is increasing. So, do you know who Margaret Thatcher is?
Yes.
So Margaret Thatcher, for those who don't know, was the British Prime Minister in the 80s. And she said a lot of things, but most famously, she said, there is no such thing as society. That was a quote by Margaret Thatcher. And what she meant was, all that exists are individuals. There is no collective society. There is only individuals. And some people like that because it made people think, well, I have the freedom to do whatever I want.
It kind of empowers people in a way.
You know, Japan is a very collectivistic society.
Right,
and sometimes that can be stressful because people think, well, nobody's worrying for me, the individual. I have to worry about society. The problem is, if you only have individuals, then who protects the weak and the poor from the rich? So I think the problem is, if we play this game, if we play Monopoly and you start with everything, I'm going to lose. Okay, we exist in societies, not just in the West, also in Japan, where wealth inequality is increasing relatively quickly. And that is making ordinary people poorer and worse off while the rich get richer. The poor will not protect themselves by fighting as individuals. The only strategic power the poor have in this game is that there is more of them. So I would encourage ordinary people, don't play the games that the rich want you to play. Find ways to connect to each other and work together and protect your collective interests. And a country like Japan, which still is to some degree a middle-class society, has strong ideas about societal collectiveness. This is a country where the middle class, I hope, can protect itself. And I hope that they do, because I think it's very, very important that you protect that middle class. And the only way to do it is by working together.
So this kind of leads to our final part about how to survive a broken economic system. And I believe it was you too, or in your book, you mentioned a saying of poker.
Yeah.
If you're playing poker and if you don't know who the idiot is, you are the idiot.
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to mention?
This is, in a sense, we're existing at a time of a battle of ideas. The way the last 50, 60, 70 years has been in the West, but also in Japan, with a large middle class that can do things like go on holidays and go to restaurants and have good quality, comfortable housing. That's not normal in the history of the West, of Japan, of the world. And you don't have that in the rest of Asia. You don't have that in most of the world. This happened because of a certain set of historical conditions where the middle class, the working class, were able to get themselves a bigger share. But that's changing. That's changing now. And I think that is as a result, in a sense, of the victory of ideas about individuality and about selfishness in society. Individuality is about freedom. But if you give everybody freedom, freedom for the heron is death for the fish. This is...
Yeah.
I think the only way for ordinary people in the middle, to protect themselves in the long term and not see living conditions continue to worsen and worsen and worsen, is to work collectively to change the rules of the game. In my country, we have a system where somebody like me, who comes from a poor background, works hard to get their family out of poverty, has to pay 50, 60% tax. Whereas extremely wealthy families who inherit billions of pounds pay nothing. If we do not change those kinds of rules, we will move into a society which is more and more and more unequal. And that is not just an abstract thing. That means more poverty for ordinary people. So I would encourage ordinary people, speak to each other, understand the economic system, read my book, find it interesting, learn about the way things can go, because things can get worse, things can get more unequal. And I'm fighting as hard as I can for it in my country, in the UK, but this is also a country which is very important to me. It is becoming more unequal. I don't want that to happen. I want living conditions to get better. I want life to get better for ordinary people. And I think the only way to achieve that is by ordinary people working together to protect their economic interests.
So if you're not rich at the moment, or you're not the millionaire, you're ordinary people. So that means that you shouldn't play the game right now, but you should stay away from it and connect with each other.
You need to work hard.
Work hard, of course.
Life is hard.
Yeah, life is hard.
I don't need to tell anybody that. Life is hard and it's getting harder. If you want to have a family, if you want to protect that family, if you want to look after that family, you have to work hard. You have to work hard. But there are a lot of temptations. People tell you need to do things like online trading, which is very difficult. Of course, you need to try to work hard to get those good jobs. And if you can, of course, you should get them. But you should understand, to a degree, this game is rigged against you. It's oya gacha, to a degree. This is happening.
Yeah.
Work hard, do everything you can to build a good life for yourself and your family. But you also do need to play that political game. And Japan is a country which, when I was here, I was always struck by how politically disinterested a lot of the young people were. And people in my country, young people, used to be politically disinterested as well. But they are losing everything. I can't explain to you how serious the problem of growing poverty is in my country and even in the US. And you don't have that here yet. But if the young, if ordinary people remain politically disinterested, things will get worse.
How about, so in Japan, we have another word other than oya gacha.
Yeah.
We call it shin nisa.
Shin nisa.
So it's like making small amounts of investment. So maybe when you were in Japan, people just put their money into a bank. But now people are into investing like S&P or Nikkei.
I think that's definitely a good idea. I think saving money in bonds and cash is generally a bad idea long term. I have to be clear, if you're going to buy things like stocks or you're going to buy things like gold, the price can go down, especially in the short term. But I think it is a good idea to buy stocks. I have a combination of stocks and gold. I hold both. But of course, we have to be realistic. For a lot of young people, the amount of money they have left over at the end of the month is not going to be very much. For a lot of people, this is not going to make the big difference. But yeah, I think sensible long-term investing, you need to look beyond just accumulating a lot of yen in a bank account. But we have to be realistic. That does involve a level of risk.
Okay, thank you so much. So I highly recommend this book to our viewers. You are a great writer.
Thank you.
It's like I say too, it's like a Netflix movie.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see the Japanese version. It'll be difficult to read.
There are a lot of interesting characters, yes. Bad guys, good guys, and everything. So may I ask your final comment in Japanese?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. じゃあ最後、うちの視聴者に向けてメッセージをお願いします。Any message for our viewers in Japanese?
なんかね。
本買ってくださいっていう。
なんか、じゃあその本はなんか、セッティングはなんかイギリスも日本語だね。なんか、すごく日本に住んでいた時は、じゃあ僕にとってすごく大切な時だよね。なんかすごく、ちょっとうつ病してたその時に。でもなんか、一つのなんかシーンになるよね。なんか日本のカラオケのシーンだね。だって実は僕はちょっとなんか歌がうまい。けど、なんか来た時はすごくカラオケ嫌いだった。すごくなんか、シャイじゃなくてけど、なんかいつもなんか上手かどうか迷っていた。人前で
歌うっていうのはね。
でもなんか一回ね、なんか、名前はヒロシだったと、日本人のおじいさんはちょっとなんか助言してくれた。なんか、カラオケの時は自分が上手かどうかはそんなに大切じゃないと言った。大切なのはなんか一緒に来てくれた人は楽しむことだね。
ヒロシいいこと言いますね。
だってなんかイギリスはちょっと日本と比べたら自己的な国でしょうね。でもだから日本から本当にいっぱい習った。なんか大切なものに。だからすごくじゃあありがたいと思います。だからなんか日本人は僕の本を楽しかったらすごく嬉しいです。
ぜひトレーディングゲーム天才トレーダーのクソったれ人生のギャリー・スティーブンソンさんでした。皆さんチャンネル登録もお願いします。ギャリーさんの YouTube のチャンネルももっと有名になっちゃいますけど、クロスディグもよろしくお願いします。今日はありがとうございました、ギャリーさん。
ありがとうございます。